Okay, so tonight's unique webinar for us. This is the first one we've had that's related to club fitting. It was through several emails that I've received about wanting to learn more. I'm going to try to turn the mics off just for a second, and then I'll open them back up to introduce David. But let's just do that. Like you said, it was more like people wanting to know more about the club fitting. We talked briefly about puring shafts and just shaft fitting one night, and I think it led into some good questions and wanting to know more. And so, with that being said, I've been a fitter for a lot of years. I don't really fit much anymore, club fit anymore. It's probably my favorite thing. It's one of my favorite things to do inside, golf performance. I mean, they're all kind of fun, the teaching, and you got fitting, and then you got fitness, and you got biomechanics, and all kinds of cool stuff. But with that being said, I don't really do it a whole lot anymore. But the basis and the way I fit, I was taught by some really had some really good mentors when I was young that walked me through the process that makes it work, not so much the club itself. The process will take you to the club. And so I wanted to bring in somebody tonight that I thought was, really high level, right at the top of the game, that's current with it, that has done a lot more fitting. I've done a lot of fittings now. I've done that for 20 plus years, and this guy is certainly when I consider a great fitter, he would be one of those guys. But also from a different perspective, he's an engineer, so he engineers the clubs you're hitting. So just to introduce you, so I'm going to be introducing David Cersley. David and I have known each other right at 10 years at Golfsmith, and he was an engineer there at Golfsmith, and did a lot of things for those guys that were a lot of great work back then. But I'm going to give you a little rundown of his background. He's if you've ever heard of the Ben Hogan irons, the new brand that came out, not the Ben Hogan from Callaway or whatever, but when the Ben Hogan company separated I think it was a couple years ago, they really are now their own thing. They're not owned by Callaway. So it's the Ben Hogan Golf Company again. They hired David in to be the lead engineer for designing those club heads, and that is no easy task, as he will probably get into greater detail about that. So with that being said, he also designed at Golfsmith. He worked with the Snake Eyes group and the Lynx back when those clubs I thought were really good. Those were really competitive clubs back in the day when he was there. He can tell you maybe more about that if you want to know about it from there. But and he was the lead fitter, and so when Golfsmith used to have all these fitters come in from all over the world to take their classes, he was the instructor. He was also trained and certified in grinding, and so he worked with all these. I think he's probably worked with Estes. I don't know if it was him or Tommy that worked with it. He can explain that here in a little bit. But worked with Bob Estes on grinds. There's all kinds of tour players they come in there and do work for, and he was the main guy, and always had a lot of cool insights. I know Edel Golf had contacted David. Edel Golf has some of the coolest grinds out there right now, in my opinion. Same thing with the Ben Hogan Golf, which is we used to be score wedges. Their grinds are second to none. Those are the two best that I've seen. But he can go into a little bit more than that. So I wanted to give you a little bit of rundown with that, and then the last thing before I introduce David to you and let him take off here is David has also had products on the Golf Digest hot list 4 years in a row, and he's also is also 5 of the last 6 years on the hot list. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up. Dave, give me just a second. I'm going to open it up here. All right, David, you ready to roll?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is David Cersley, and I've been fortunate to know Matt. I got probably going on 10 years, and we met over at Golfsmith when I was part of the Golfsmith R&D there, and we struck up a great friendship. We had similar interests on how the club and the biomechanics of the golf work together, and we've had a lot of lengthy discussions. And Matt painted a pretty picture there for me on my background. launch monitor and club fitting portions of it, along with there was two other gentlemen fortunate enough to work with both Bill Patton and Jeff Sheet, two industry veterans. And then after that, I started my own company, and I did the consulting and worked with the gentleman up in Fort Worth on the Ben Hogan Fort Worth 15 and TK15 wedges, which was one of the great thrills of my life to be part of something so special. I think that we all revere the Hogan line as something special, and the amount of engineering that went into those clubs was unprecedented.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so from a fitting aspect, taught on fitting at Golfsmith and through my career. I think when I was with Jeff Sheet, I think the last time we had done 2 running year counts. I know one year I did over 220 driver fitting, and then one year we got up to around 250. And so, and then we started getting into club gapping, iron shaft fitting, wedge fitting, putter fitting, and at some point we just kind of lost track of the number of fittings for the amount of people actually coming through the system.
So, hey David, I'm going to give a quick rundown on just kind of the basis of club fitting, and then I know you already have outlined what you want to talk about tonight. And I'm just going to give kind of a quick outline of what I would generally go through, just so we have it recorded, and the players can kind of go back through this, so when they go through and get their fits and so forth, what they kind of look for. Is that cool?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So, with my background, with the fitting, when a player comes out, you got to realize that David doesn't only do fittings. He's definitely more advanced than I am, because one, he's an engineer. But when a player gets to me, the engineering kind of aspects are out of the equation. It's really just like the tool set. So when you go to get your clubs fit, I was this way as well. I always believed the person or the facility that had the biggest toolbox had the best advantage. And so, like, if you look at the cool clubs now, or cool sticks, or I'm not sure what it is, but they do, from what I've heard, they do a fantastic job just because of, they've got the biggest toolbox. And so when I used to do this, I always just, I had to have all the heads, I had to have different angles with the heads, I had to have different weights within the heads, I had to have different shafts, lengths, all this stiffness, weights within that, torques, and so forth. And so I believe so when you're going to a facility, one, you're going to want to go to one that has a great reputation, but you also got to be really careful of going to a box store that, there's 2 of them that I would tell you to be really careful. Going to one that only carries one brand, that they say, this is only, we're only Ping, or we're only Titleist, and if that, basically if you don't fit within that, you don't get it, or some kind of other club that maybe a Mura. Mura's got great irons and so forth. But it's not for all these companies. My point is, it's not for everybody. You need to go to somewhere that's got a big toolbox, but then you need somebody that understands the tools. And that sometimes can be challenging. If you just walk into a general retail store, I can tell you, and David can tell you, and especially us both working at the corporate headquarters of Golfsmith, that there's things that on their shelves that they're just trying to move. And you walk in there and you tell them you want something like this or that, they're just going to standard stock, standard length clubs, standard shaft, standard loft, standard lie, standard everything, standard grip, that's the one thing they want to sell you on. And I'm not here to rip retail stores. That's not my job, and I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is that's kind of what they do. They don't want to have to put an order into the manufacturers and do all these little things that a really good high-level fitter will do. And so when you're going to look around and going to find a fitter, make sure that you're not just going in there and getting stock everything. That your stock may be what you are. You'll probably be 1 in 1,000 if that's the case. But the way I used to fit, and I'm going to try to keep this short, so I want to get David back on here, and I want to get his philosophies because it's way more important. But there's a lot of philosophies on like what's more important, the head or the shaft. Now my philosophy was, here's my philosophy. My philosophy is you have to have the right head first. You're hitting the head, you're not hitting the shaft. So the ball's not hitting the shaft, the ball is hitting the head. So, and an engineer like David knows this, like when you get the right head, and David actually taught me this a long time. He may have forgotten this, but he told me like when the drivers came out, those square heads and all this stuff for higher MOI and all that, they sounded like aluminum baseball bats. And the spin rates were insane, like how high they were and all that. I remember David specifically telling me it's because of the angles and the shapes. It's what's making that sound. But it's also making the spin. It's kind of, I don't know. They're just it's cheap and they didn't go very well. And anyway, it didn't work. And so what my point is, you could put a $500 shaft in a head like that, and it's still not going to be very good for most people, especially the better players. And you could take a great head, you take a really high quality head that's shaped right for the player, you put a bad shaft in it, and they can still play. You take a terrible head, and you put a $5,000 shaft, whatever the highest one is out there, and you put it in there, it's still not going to work because of the engineering starts with the head because that's what you hit first. The engineering goes to the shaft, and it goes into the grip. That's my philosophy. So I fit the head first. I'm a big believer of finding the shape, the loft, the lie, the sole relief for irons. I believe the design for the driver. It really is the bottom line. The design is what you hit the best. I don't know what that would be. I have no idea. David and I just talked about that earlier. But you will have one that you hit better than others, and for some reason, that's why there's different companies, and that's why you need a lot of clubs to choose from. After you get the head right, and that would be both, we know with wedges, irons, hybrids, and driver, and even putter head, and even putters. And David, maybe if we have time, we can run into some of the things that are out there with putter heads, which is crazy, but definitely works. You go to the shaft, and then you start. Basically, when I go to the shaft, the way I always fitted was I'd start with this pretty much a standard length shaft, or if it was a normal, if somebody's really tall, it's different. But if their stock height, 5'10", 6'2", somewhere in there, I'd start standard length, and I'd go the stiffness first. I would go to I'd go softer, so I'd fit with a soft shaft, softer than I felt like they needed. So I'd start softer, and I worked my way up stiffer. And then if I got the player to the right, I'd always try to work right to that level, right on the edge before they tipped over, right to the edge. That's where you want to be, right on the edge. If you cross that edge and you get something too stiff, you're better off to end up with something too soft, in my opinion. Now, David may say different. You're better off to end up with something that's a little too soft in the shaft than you are too stiff. If you get too stiff, you can always back off a little bit and soften it up or change the way you torque the club through the ball, but you can't produce more speed. So if you're out of your wheelhouse and you're trying to create more speed, which is the most common thing that I see in fitting, is people buy too stiff, the shaft too heavy and too stiff. Then what happens is you start thrusting, and you start creating that premature acceleration out of transition, and then all kinds of problems start. So I always like to fit. I think the great fitters start the way I was taught. It's certainly not my philosophy. This is just the mentors that train me. You start softer and you work your way stronger. Then you start shorter. Then you change the length on them. So you go a little shorter and you work your way up longer, and you figure it out. And then you start to play around with the weights, and there's other things you can go on and on and on. But if you stay with those two things, if the fitter's staying with is going that philosophy of softer to stronger and shorter to longer, I believe that you'll find that you will be in a good situation. So after that, then you really kind of work your way to the grip. Now there's different things within all that. You can get, we'll talk about puring. David will talk about puring, especially from an engineering standpoint. He's much better qualified. But you go to the grip and so forth. And now I'm going to end this real quick on my end and let David take over. There's three most important clubs in a fitting, I believe, especially at amateur golf. Now, when you get to the tour, it changes, but there's a couple of your European guys on here play tour golf. But in general, these are the ones you want to focus on. You want to, and when I ask everybody this, when they come here, I always say, "What do you think your three most parts of fitting are?" And they never give me the right answer. Irons are usually always number one, and that's like number 4. So the number 1 is driver. If you can't drive the ball, so if you can't drive it, you're not going to be able to play. If you're out of bounds 3 out of 10 holes or whatever it is, 3 out of 9 holes, you're done. Your driver's most important. Your putter's this is my philosophy. Your putter's the second most important. So those are usually like the end, like the last thing people think about, and then the wedges are third. And in my opinion, after that, and they're kind of close. It's pretty close. It's like irons and then hybrids. Now, when you're on the PGA Tour, it's your irons, because your iron play, they already drive it well, they putt well, and all that. So it's their irons. How close can they get to dispersion? That becomes a big deal. But for amateur golf and even high-level amateur golf, driver, putter, wedges, you fit those three things right. Those are your scoring clubs. You get a good driver, you keep it. Don't change it. Don't trade it. Keep it. You get a good putter, same thing. You get good wedges, same thing. And then you can start talking about irons. But I'll shut up after this. But David knows this as well. As golf companies make more money, they want to move irons. So when they're trying to sell you stuff, they're trying to sell you irons. The number one thing, and I see that all my players that come to me where their drivers are terrible, and they're usually terrible drivers of the ball. And so I always convince them, like, look, make that investment, get the driver right first, and get something that you're really confident you step on the tee with, that you can just pull the trigger and knock it down the fairway. And your miss it's a good miss, and it's not a bad miss. So that being said, David, I know you have kind of outlined you wanted to talk about, I think, line angles and something else. So I'll let you fire away, my friend.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Matt. You and I are very similar in our fitting approaches as far as, what do we consider number one, what do we consider number two, and what do we consider number three. Just you and I have a very similar interest on there. And I always put, for me, it's always putting the putter the first. And I think you can split hairs all day long, but number 1A is always going to be putter and driver for me. And most people either they can't putt or they can't put the ball in play off the tee. And it's amazing how many people that when they come to me for fitting, they contact me and I'll say, well, okay, I want you to send me a couple scorecards. And I want you to record down how many times you hit the ball out of play. And I also want to know how many times you got the ball up and down. I also want to know how many free putts you have. And I feel like if I have that, I have a good basis moving forward to understand this person's game. If I see that they've actually, there's 14 tee shots in a round of the golf with it's going to require a driver or a free metal, and let's just call them drivers. So you hit your driver 14 times. If you've taken 8 drops, that's where I'm going to really focus in on. That's the highest priority. If I see a person that didn't take any drops off the tee, but I see that they've taken 38 putts, that's going to kind of lead me, okay, we got to get this putter hit for you correctly. And there's things you can do and there's things you can look at. And, I agree with Matt. Let's just say we've got a customer that walks in and is struggling to find the right driver. The way I always started the process was I started in an indoor setting. I want the golfer to be completely relaxed. I like to have them in a caged environment. And people go, they don't like that because they're hitting indoors. But what I noticed is if I take the golfer outside and set them on the driving range, the first swing they make, they pipe it down the center, or they feel pretty confident. But if I see them go over there and they make their natural swing and they slice it 30 yards off to the right, they're automatically going to start compensating. And the whole point of a fitting is to fit the golf equipment, the head and the shaft, the grip, the entire equipment has to match up to that golfer's swing so that you can accentuate the positive in it and you can minimize that the big miss, and you can eliminate that 30 to 40 yard shot off to the right or the big hook. A lot of times there's some equipment issues in there that we can identify. And if I get them in a cage, all of a sudden I can see a repeatable pattern, whether I'm using a flight scope or I'm using TrackMan or some type of indoor system where I can track club head and path and ball. I want to see what their natural tendency is. In other words, if I see a golfer who fights the slice, but indoors, their natural swing is to come into the approach with a 2 or 3 degree open face angle at impact. They can't understand why they're slicing it. And the next thing you know, we've probably all been to the golf course where you see someone who's forward pressed the golf shaft to the point where they're a right-handed golfer where the hands are actually ahead of the left hip, and there's no lock on the face, and it's shut, and they're trying to do everything possible to fight that slice. Well, what I want to identify as a fitter, and what you want that fitter to identify to you is, what are your natural tendencies? If we notice that it impacts the base and open, okay, this person's natural swing, when they just go ahead and rip at it, and they can't see what happens to make some crazy adjustments outside, you can go ahead and say, guess what, this person needs a head that has a 1-degree face angle that's closed. And what that does is if their natural tendency is to come in with it open, and you give them the natural close face, and you adjust the setting where it's 1 degree closed, now all of a sudden they're making impact where it's square close face. And the other thing that we look at when we're fitting a driver is we look at the impact location. Some of the higher MOI drivers, Matt mentioned the square drivers, which was kind of a unique little pad. Yeah, they sounded bad, didn't go very far, but we had to try and get as much weight out on the perimeter of that driver as possible. And the best way to explain MOI is if I put a barbell and I put the weight real close to the center of my hand, I don't have a lot of moment of inertia if I go and I push out on the far end of the barbell. If I have a real long, like a bench press barbell with the weight stuck in on my hand, if I push on the far end of that, outside end of that barbell, it's pretty easy to lose that barbell. But if I take those weights and I stick that weight out on the perimeter, I can stabilize that head on that off-center impact. So if you start pushing them out there where the weight is, suddenly that head's going to resist that twist. So one thing that we start looking at is we start identifying the natural face and the natural swing tendencies of the golfer. And then what we'll start to do is try and marry up the driver head to them. Are they a person that consistently gets it in one spot, one tiny little pattern, or are they kind of someone that sprays it all over the face? And if they're a higher handicapper, it's usually all over the case, all over the place. And what we'll try and do is fit them into a driver in the head that has a higher MOI, something that's really forgiving for them. And then from there, it gets into shaft fitting. And shaft fitting, the whole goal for me as a fitter, and like I say, I did 200 fittings one year, and then I did 200 the next, and I had 0 returns off the process. And it was real simple. I would have the golfer hit theirs, and then I would take the launch monitor, and then I would go and allow the launch monitor to kind of guide us where we're going. And the biggest factor that we look for is smash factor. The whole goal is of that driver shaft and that driver head is to get all the energy and all the power that you've created from your body, from your proper rotation, your training. You're going to go ahead and load that shaft. What we want to do is get all the energy from the golfer to the shaft, to the head, to the ball. And my philosophy was real simple on fitting. I don't care if you swing 120 miles an hour. I don't care if you swing 80 miles an hour. The goal of the fitting for a driver, if you walk into a golfsmith, you walk into Matt, you walk into any club, the club champion pool clip, you want to drive the ball as efficiently as possible and as straight as possible. And that's the number one goal. I don't care how fast you swing. I've seen guys go and get on launch monitors and have 110 mile an hour club head speed, and the ball move 115 to 120 miles an hour. I've seen guys get up there with 90 miles an hour club head speed and move the ball at 135. And so what we look for as a fitter is we're trying to get a conversion ratio of 1.5. So if you're swinging 100 miles an hour with your driver, if you're efficient and you're maxed out on your efficiency, the golf ball should be moving pretty close to 145 at a minimum to 150 miles an hour. So we're looking for a 1.5 ratio. And that tells us as a fitter that you've maximized that equipment. You've transferred all the energy you can. If there's any tour players on here, they'll tell you that they've been on enough launch monitors shaft ratio. I'm not going to get into characteristic time or the face flexing, but 1.5 is the sweet spot. Matter of fact, Matt's got something on the screen there that shows the 1.49.
Yep, that's the average.
Yeah, and that's average. And so what you're looking for is that you can see as you go down that list, you see 3 iron, 4 iron, 5 iron, you'll see that smash factor decreases. And the only reason that it decreases is there's more loss on the face, and the ball tends to slide up the face a little bit more. But when we're talking about drivers, the goal is to get that around 1.49, and then even your 3 wood, your 5 wood, we're trying to get them right up there, right on top of each other. You see that, yeah, Matt's got it highlighted there. So that's always the goal there. And when it comes to shaft, there's the goal with the shaft is to try and find you the right length. So I always started with length, and we would start with I would always start with a 45-inch driver, and then I would move down a half an inch or up a half an inch based on the impact pattern using impact. And then you typically find that there's one length where the golfer falls into a situation where you get a dispersion pattern starting to tighten up. In my experience, typically somewhere around 44 and a half to 44 inches seems to be the magical sweet spot for 99% of the drivers out there. Matt, you may agree or disagree, but most of the guys fall in that category. And here's the funny part. The drivers that you buy off the shelf are coming in 46 and a quarter inches now. And they're not trying to sell you accuracy. They're trying to sell you distance. They don't care if you hit 10 shots out of bounds. What they care about is that you go home and you remember the one shot that you hit on number 8 that you smashed 320. And they don't care that the fact that you hit it 327 other times and none of them are in play and you hit 3 off the tee. They don't care about that. They want the one sweet shot. They want you to remember that one sweet shot. The goal of a fitting is to get you in the fairway as much as possible. Give you that equipment that's going to allow you to optimize your performance on the golf course. And so what we would do is we would start fitting length. Most of the time it ended up a little bit shorter. And then we would use the flight scope or the launch monitor. It would tell you, it would give you some averages on, hey, this is my launch angle. And then it'll tell you optimization. Like, hey, this golfer can gain another 10 yards by getting more loft. And they can also do that through efficiency of the shaft. Now, Matt and I were talking prior to you guys getting on here. We've all had people walk into our shop for a fitting and say, I want to hit it another 10 or 15 yards. And typically that can be achieved if the equipment is poorly fit for the golfer. But, guys, you got to be realistic when you walk into a fitting. If you're walking in there looking for 30 or 40 yards, typically the old joke is if somebody wants 30 or 40 more yards, tell them to move up a tee. I can get you 10 or 15, but I don't know that I can get you 30 or 40 with a driver. And so what we would do from there is once we have them in the right flex and the right weight of the golf shaft, I'm a big proponent of shaft puring. I know Matt touched a little bit on it, I believe, with you guys. But Dick White, I think it's worth shaft puring every club in your bag. Every club in my bag that I've put together since I got to meet the gentleman at SSC Pure, every club in my bag, including the putters, the putter shaft. I pure every graphite shaft 100% of the time. It's a tremendous difference. And the way I can best explain it to you is the way Dick White, the owner of SSC Pure, explained it to me. If you were to go buy tires for your car, you always want to get them balanced, right? So when you buy these tires, they're coming off a factory line, they're coming off an assembly line, no different than your golf shaft. And the way they make these golf shafts is not all that different than your tires. They're making these tires, and if you go and just put them on the rims, you put them on your car, as your car gets up to speed, you get up to 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, it's going to feel like you're riding on some out-around, almost square-like tires. You're going to be bouncing around. And what the puring does is kind of eliminates that bounce that's in the golf shaft and the inconsistencies in the golf shaft by finding its pure mark. And what it does is it goes and it looks through the golf shaft and finds out where that shaft is the most stable and is going to be the most stable through the golf club. And it's about the best way I can explain it. And I've seen golf shafts, if you put them into a frequency analyzer, I'm sure Matt has too, you put a 200-gram weight on them in a cured shaft, the shaft will actually oscillate almost in a perfect vertical line. And if you ping it in a horizontal manner, it will almost stay within a perfect horizontal line. If you take a shaft that's out of round, out of pure, the shaft, I've seen them actually make figure 8 shapes. So they're bouncing all over the place. And here you are, you just invested in a new, let's say a $300 driver, you just invested in a $200 golf shaft, and you stick it in there and you can't hit it on the planet. But one of the things it doesn't make sense to me. You've got this golf shaft, you've gone through this fitting, go ahead and invest in the $6 to go ahead and get shaft cured and optimize your equipment. That bouncing around in that head, it literally, at one point, and I don't have the data in front of me, so please forgive me, at one point we were doing some testing in golfsmiths versus shafts that were cured versus uncured. The impact location on the Iron Byron robot was about the size of a dime, at about 110 miles an hour. In an uncured shaft, we had as much as a ball and a half off center, toe and heelward in an uncured shaft. So that tells you where that impact is going. That also tells you how far offline your golf ball is now going to go off that driver. And so it was quickly, just seeing that alone, watching the performance of those shafts, just let me know that that is one of the greatest technologies in the game today for the average golfer and the professional golfer. There's a ton of guys on tour that are curing golf shafts right now. And then, after that, you fit the grip based on your hands, and then we can probably talk about that later. I know we're probably butting up against time here. And then the other thing that we get is putter. I always like to look at the putter, and I like to see the golfer. There's great technology out there like SAM, the Science in Motion fitting system. The SAM monitors your pace, it monitors the flow of the stroke, it tells you whether you're hitting down, and it tells you whether you're hitting up. And why that's important, it'll actually tell you face rotation. Face rotation is important because the location of where that hosel is, if it's a center shafted putter, that typically means that the golfer is taking the club back as square as possible and through impact as square as possible. They're not really trying to open or close the face. Whereas you might see a ping answer, you'll actually see that actually on that SAM that actually opens and closes. And even a putter like the old Wilson 8802, that's designed for someone who really kind of opens the toe and closes the toe through impact. Sorry, man, I probably should have told you I was going to talk about.
No, keep going. We're not pushed on time. We're just as good as you are, so just keep firing away, man.
And so what I always try and do is eliminate the big misses off the tee and the big misses on the putting green. And what we want to do is get a golfer into a length and a line that's going to optimize their performance. And it's pretty quick when you determine with the Science in Motion system whether a golfer over-rotates, whether they are square to square, or whether their impact location's there. Matt's got a nice image pulled up there from the...
That's what it looks like. We have one at our facility out at Lake Cliff. This is what we use, so it gives you all this data here.
Tremendous amount of data, and you can see there that it tells you, okay, this person, it'll tell you the path, it'll tell you whether they get the ball space,
rise
square,
angle.
that'll determine whether we need offset or less offset, or the heel location. If you see it square to square, we're probably going to try a center shafted putter. And then the other thing we're going to look at on a putter is loft. And everybody puts it a little bit different, and that's always the beautiful part of putting, is what a good way for you to look at putting is, you ever go to a golf green and you're one of the first dew sweepers in the morning, and you go out and see where somebody hit a putt, and it looks like the ball hit about every 8 inches. You see a dark green spot in kind of where the dew is breaking the dew on the green. That tells you that the putter doesn't have the right amount of loft. That ball is hopping and skidding. So when that ball is airborne, in other words, where the dew is still on the green, what you're looking for as a putter fitter is you want that ball to be in overspin as quick as possible. And when that ball is in the airborne, and that's got a picture up there, you can see the ball's in a couple putts and just hit them with your eyes closed. And if you start hearing like the ball hitting and skipping, that tells you you got a loft issue, and then you should go see Matt out there at Lake Cliff and get that loft on that putter fit correctly. Because what's going is your ball is actually hitting and skidding, and when it's airborne and it's landing, it can go anywhere off those bounces. The other thing is that you're losing all your forward momentum, and all the speed is coming out of the golf ball. Every time it hits and skips, you're reducing the forward velocity of that ball, and all of a sudden now you're losing distance. Well, I can't figure out why I'm losing all my putts. I miss all my putts short. Well, your air, sometimes it's just a matter of simple, we don't have the right putter loft on you. And you've got the ball airborne, and it's hitting and skidding, and it's killing all the energy. So one of the goals that we look for is in putter fitting is trying to get you into the right putter loft, and then we go from there. And typically, you know, it's pretty easy to see lie angle, toe up, toe down. That's got some great images there on the screen for everybody. Again, next time you're out early in the morning on a putting green, go roll some putts. And what you should see is a pretty consistent line. You can see there that right at the bottom of the screen, that actually shows that ball is airborne a pretty good distance. That ball is airborne now. We're talking, you have to forgive me, I don't have my glasses on, but that ball is in the air probably 4 to 6 inches somewhere. Would you agree, Matt?
Oh yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, and think about what's going to happen with that ball. It's going to hit, and it can go anywhere. It can go dead left. It can go dead right. It can just kill all. It's going to kill all the energy when it's in the airborne that long. You want your irons in the air. You want your driver in the air. You don't want your putter ball flight in the air. You want it on the ground and rolling. And what you'll find, what that stand will determine is whether the putter is coming in on a descending or an ascending angle of attack. You know, and so what we can identify is what's the proper length, the proper lie, the proper face angle, the proper head type pretty quickly on a golfer just by using the stand. And the last thing, I know everybody is probably running a little late for everybody. I appreciate your attention, and I'll open it up to a couple of questions here. And I know we've covered a lot. Is on iron. You know, I pretty much when it comes to iron. One of the things that I'm looking for as a fitter is I try to determine what your set makeup is and what you can control. And Matt and I were talking about this prior to everyone being joining us here this evening. Again, thank you very much. And what we try to do is we try to fit the set for what you can handle. And the way we would always do it, and the way I still do it, is simply this. I'm going to have you hit your set, I'm going to get you warmed up, and then I'm going to have you go out and hit some iron shots. And as you're working through your bag, we're going to be looking a couple things with our flight scope. We're going to be looking at the data. We're going to be looking at your divots. We're going to have space, impact stickers. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a 7 iron, and I like to take a 9 iron that are of different lengths. And I like to figure out exactly what your ideal length is. And I also like to determine what your lie angle is. Now, when it comes to lie angle, I lie fit every club in the bag. Every club gets fit off the lie board. And when my personal philosophy and what I've seen over the years is if you just tell somebody that every club in the bag is 2 degrees, and that's a great picture there. If I do a fitting for you and you're kind of over the top with your short irons, which isn't all that uncommon, because golfers think, oh, I got this short iron, I got to hit it a ton. And I get over the top of it, now all of a sudden the toe's down. Or as they work through their set, you may find that that's 2 degrees flat. Let's just say we bent it 2 degrees down, flat. What we find is that the swing changes with the longer of that club, with most golfers. And so what we try to do is we try to fit lie angle for every club in that bag. And there's a point where when we're fitting that bag, we're trying to determine your makeup. You know, hybrids are one of the great inventions of today's modern game. It makes the game really easy. What we try to do is figure out where's the point in your bag that you can no longer control irons, and where do hybrids come in? And people go, do I need 2 hybrids? Do I need 3 hybrids? Do I need 4 hybrids? And to me, it has nothing to do with, it doesn't have as much to do with club head speed or age. It has the ability to actually hit and compress the golf shortfall with what you have. And the way I'll work through a bag is I might have you hit, once you're warmed up, I'm going to have you hit some 7 irons, then some pitching wedge. And then I'm going to have you hit some 6 irons, and then maybe a 9 iron, and then an 8, and then a 5. And I'm going to kind of bounce you around through that set. And when you're on the golf course, you're not hitting the same club consistently over. And what I'm trying to do is get 5 good, clean shots to get a good baseline average with each iron in your bag. And if all of a sudden I realize that at the 4 iron, we had to get 10 shots to throw away 5 bad ones because you hobbled 5 or just topped them or they're just so bad you can't really count them, I realized that, okay, the 5 iron is where the iron set is actually going to make up. So it comes down to pure performance. And what we say at that point is, it's a term, it's not the most endearing. If we just say the 5 iron is the most you can handle at this point. And what we start looking at is shaft weight. You know, the newer technology in graphite shafts. There's a company called Steel Fiber makes huge, just probably the best graphite shaft in the market today. When it comes to steel shafts, what we're finding is most people are now going to a lighter weight swing, a lighter swing weight shaft for the average golfer. The tour guy still hits 120 plus gram shaft. Most of the average golfers are starting to come down to around 110 to 90 grams on the steel shaft. And what we look for is what happens in the golf swing. As the golfer, especially going through the fitting, we start to notice where the club head is. It starts to get really laid off, and they look like they're laboring. Another way you can tell if the shafts are too heavy for you as a person walking around the golf course, start looking at your scores. If you hit the first, you're typically a person through the first 12 holes that hit, 10 out of 12 greens, or that'd be awesome, right? But you can't seem to hit the last 6 greens, you're only hitting 1 or 2. That's generally a good indication that the shaft might be a little bit heavy for you. And one of the things that we look for. And then in the fitting, what we're looking for is what can you control. And guys out there, there's a lot of information, and I know we just skimmed on it tonight, and I'll open it up to some questions here. One of the things that you want to pay attention to, and I've mentioned this to Matt, if you go to a driver fitting, whether it's your local club fitter or you go to a big box retailer, if that person who's fitting you tells you that this is the right driver shaft for you or this is the perfect shaft for you, the best thing you can do is just go ahead and walk out. And Matt and I agree on this 100%.
Yep.
There is no one shaft that's perfect for anybody out there. The whole purpose of a driver fitting and a shaft fitting is to narrow it down and say this person can handle an F-flex, they can handle this much torque, they can handle this much weight, and that's the window. If I go to the Golf Works catalog that I have in front of me here, I bet there's over 200 driver shafts in there. And the whole goal of a fitter is to know those shafts and to know exactly what this golfer can handle and fit and optimize their performance. Again, the driver fitting should be we want you to move the ball as efficiently and as fast as possible and as accurate as possible. I don't care how fast you swing, I care how fast you move the golf ball. And when it comes to your putter, make sure you got the right length, lie, and make sure you got the right loft. And when it comes to your iron, let's figure out where your set is, let's figure out the right flex, let's figure out the right lie angle, and then let's get you out there on the golf course and move forward. So I'll open it up to any questions. I know that's a ton of information. There's some big gaps in there. So any questions you guys have, I'll try and answer.
Yeah, so Greg has a question here. He said, to start with here, he just sent a chat message in. It said,
Okay.
How has fitting changed over the past 5 years, and how often should you go through a fitting?
Oh, that's a great question. Was it Greg?
Greg, yeah, Greg Fogg. You may know Greg Fogg. He plays at Twin Creeks. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Greg, the name's very familiar. Fitting. I believe the question was how often should a person get fit, and then how much has it changed in the last 5 years?
Yep.
The golf fitting technology has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. With the advent of flight scope, the advent of 3D mapping and seeing the golf ball from start to finish, seeing and being able to track club head path, angle of attack with a driver or even a putter or your irons, and being able to really get into 500,000 shots into the database system. And when it looks at those acceleration profiles, we can, as a fitter, we can go into there, we can look at that acceleration profile and go, this is the right or wrong shaft for you. Whereas before, we would have had to kind of work our way through it or kind of guess a little bit. But with the advent of the newer technology, it makes it really easy. How often should you get a fit? I would do a lie angle fitting session at least once a year, probably the beginning of the year, once you've kind of maybe gotten some of the winter rust off. I know we're pretty fortunate here in Austin where we don't really have a winter season too much. But once you've gotten kind of back, you got your lessons in with that, you're feeling pretty good, you know, that's when you want to go ahead and get on the live board and take a look at those irons. I believe it's worth doing on your irons at least once a year. On your driver, once, maybe twice a year. Get on a launch monitor that you feel that's comfortable with the fitter, and make sure that you're doing the things that you should be doing. As your swing improves with your golf coaches, you know, sometimes you just have to adjust the golf equipment. So if you're taking a lot of lessons and you go through a series of lessons, I would recommend after that series of lessons is complete to go just, you know, get on the live board with your irons and make sure that they're good to go. And anytime you get a new product, don't just walk into the big box retailers or go to eBay and buy it. Make sure you're fit for it.
And I think to follow up on that, same question is, and I know you know this, is one of the reasons why you want to recheck the irons that you have for, especially here in Austin. We have that clay, you know, that hard pan, and you know it does affect it. You know, you definitely see irons that you're hitting a lot that'll get affected, and it'll bend them the other way.
Yeah, because you know, with the materials that are used, for example, a forged iron, say the Ben Hogan irons were used with a 1020 carbon steel, and what that is they're forged. So it's a different, it's a billet forge process. We can talk about it on another night. I can show you a video and all that. But the irons are softer, even though they get heat treated. The material is extremely soft. I mean, you're trying to adjust the hosels on them. It doesn't take a lot of force to adjust loft and lie on them. And when you get the cast clubs that are out there, they're typically a 431 or a 17.4. It's a harder material, and they won't move as much or as frequently. But if you're playing forged iron, like a Mizuno or Deere or whatever the forged iron or the Hogan brand, go ahead and at least get those loft and lies checked once or twice a year at least.
Cool.
That's a good point.
So I'm going to show something real quick, and then we'll have some more questions. I've got Davis Love up, and one of the things I do in a fitting is I will look at swing right off the bat. So I'll take if the camera's stable, and I think this one is, we're going to go through the inside quadrant of the ball, through the middle of the spine. All right. Actually, we'll go through since we're doing fitting. We'll go through the shaft, and then we're going to draw another one here where I go through the inside quadrant of the ball. We'll go through the middle of the spine. And this is a really good way to help somebody understand dynamic clip fitting, because it used to be, and David knows this, like, you know, your fit off basically how you used to, the old style, like, you know, way back when, you know, people thought how your hands were set up was how your toe was going to sit at address. Well, that has nothing to do with it. So you could have high hands here or low hands, and it could be vice versa at impact, which is called like a dynamic fitting. So when we go back and he comes through on his downswing, you'll see like he gets really close to the shaft line here. It's slightly up, but you can see the heel's really down below that line. When I see that, Davis fits one flat. So he's a tall guy, you know. So you had being tall doesn't mean you're upright, and that's another thing. Now, if his hand line was, excuse me, let me turn that off. So if his hands were more vertical, like if I pushed his hands like more this way, and so the shaft was more up and down towards this other line this way, you can bet money if that's the Bryson Chambeau, which we can have a conversation here in a little bit. But that's that's going to be a whole different lie angle. It's not going to be the same thing. It's going to be, you're going to be anyway. If these hands move towards this line, you're going upright. You go below this line, you're going flat, and that is ultimately how everything is actually. At the end of the day, it's all based on this right here. What's going on right at at impact, what's the shaft plane through the ball? And there's no wrong way. There's players out on the tour that are, like I think Rose is like one up. So Rose is one up, he's one flat. They're both phenomenal ball strikers. Yeah, if you got Scott Hoke, I think was 4 upright. Scott Hoke was a great iron player, phenomenal. Ben Hogan was like 6 flat. So a lot of it's just style based, but I think it's a good point to, as we're having this conversation, just to bring it up, because where that shaft is, the angle your hands are in the relative to the shaft and the face down at the bottom, that line is going to determine more about your line angle than anything.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. And another way you can always tell if you're properly fit for your irons, especially your wedges, is your divot should look like a dollar bill. It should be a nice square, a nice rectangular divot. And if you see where your divot looks like when you take your irons and you swing, and it looks like it's on a 45 degree, say it looks like the toe area is catching down, and then that's dirt, and then there's kind of some grass towards the heel area. That's a good indication for you guys that you need to go see somebody and get your lie angles adjusted, because that means that the way you're swinging it right now, and if you're not taking lessons, is the way you're swinging it right now is that you're toe down. Yep. And it'll be the exact opposite. If you're hitting it heelward, you'll notice that the grass starts to tear more heelward. You can put your club right back in that divot. It should be a nice square divot. If it's not a nice square divot, then it's a good chance, an indication to you whether you're too flat, too upright, or what's going on. Plus, you can watch ball flight typically. Usually, if the toe is catching, usually that's the indication that that ball is kind of going a left to right for a right-handed golf, or a left to right. And if it's too upright, usually the heel catches and it shuts the face, and you'll start that ball to the center, to the left, to right to left ball, like.
Yeah, we can show divot patterns. I have some photos of that, so it's good. I mean, that's a great way, because if you see your divot pattern, and a better player will typically have the heel going forward about 4 inches past the ball, and then the toe will turn a little bit. I mean, that's not optimal, but that's what you'll kind of have a little drawing motion. The toe would be past the heel where it cuts.
Okay. Yeah.
And then on the other way, what you're saying would be like, which is what we always see, is like somebody that's over the top hitting a cut slice. They're hitting that toe first, and the heel is dragging forward, and you have an angle the other way, and that's a no-go. You never see anybody that plays well doing that. Now you can have a divot that's left, like Colin Montgomery's divot's left, but it's square. So that's what you're talking about. Square. That's what that means your face rotation is correct. And usually, if you have a dollar bill, then your shaft is usually pretty close to being down where it needs to be, within an optimal area, gray area.
Yeah. I agree.
Do we have any more questions? I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there. If there are, just fire away. I don't have any yet, but I'm sure somebody will have something.
Yeah, I thought I saw something pop up. One of like the chat things pop up while we were.
I think that was Greg, actually. Maybe another one though. It looks like. There's Robert. I don't know if you see this or not, David, but it says that he likes to use impact tape. Let's see, once in a while. Yeah, there's a sweet spot in the center of the face, whereas it sometimes depending on the, it's sometimes lower depending on the loft.
Are we talking driver or are we talking iron?
I'm thinking iron. Yeah, irons.
Okay. On iron, typically was the way we design irons, and this is part of the painstaking process that we went through with Hogan irons that made them such tremendous engineering marvels. We spent hours and hours and hours of watching ball flight and impact and seeing the efficiency factor, not only with human testing, but with robotic testing. What you'll typically find is that if you had a traditional set, let's say a 3-through pitch, the average golfer has trouble with getting the toe around on the 3 and the 4 and kind of even on the 5 iron. So what we did is we moved the center of gravity the head, the closer that center of the gravity of the head is to the center of gravity of that shaft, the quicker that club face is actually going to rotate around in a circle. And it allows you to close that club face just a split second quicker. And so what we did was we typically, as design engineers, the club head CG, and without going through each individual head, is typically heelward, and then it gradually works its way through the steps until you get out towards the wedges, and then pretty much from your pitch and wedge to 9, somewhere in there, depending on the step makeup, the profile design that you're looking for, whether it's cavity or blade, it might alter a little bit here. But let's just say 9 iron for tonight's discussion. That center of gravity is actually toeward of the center of the face. And the reason that is if we look at where the impact locations are on these irons, that 99% of the golfers that hit the ball with their short iron are actually about a millimeter to a millimeter and a half toeward of center on the short iron, and they're heelward on the inside. So what we try and do is we try and match up the impact location to the CG of the head, and optimize not only the CG of the head to the impact location, but the CG of the head in relation to moving it closer to the CG of the shaft, so that head will rotate around a little bit easier on your 3 iron.
Like this,
You'll
you know,
remember
like
I
that.
believe it was the R5 driver that has 4 weights on it. Somebody can correct me here, but if you were having trouble getting the face around, you would put the heavy weight towards the heel. And that's no different than when we engineer the iron. And the CG in a vertical direction on an iron is right at the 3rd to the 5th score line on the face, depending on the model. And like a blade, it's going to be between probably around the 4th to 5th groove on the face. And your larger cavity back irons, they're probably going to be a little bit lower because we can move the discretionary weight around to optimize the MOI or the forgiveness of that club, and that'll allow us to drop that CG for a higher ball flight. So it's usually down around a groove. And when we're talking about moving the CG around, most of these sets don't move them very much. We're talking millimeters.
Speaking of that, so one of the things that I think, well, definitely I've noticed is, you know, when guys like you engineer golf clubs, is that you know, the clubs, they play strong, but they don't play strong. Like, so, like, what I mean by that is, like, you know, that now you've got 9 irons that fly like a 9 iron, but like they go a long way. You know, like, it's not like flying like a 3 iron, but that's the CG, right? And then they just counter with the loft. You add more bounce, right? So you got more of a cambered sole with less loft, with you know, lower CG, right? Is that not right, or I may be off? I mean, that's your wheelhouse there.
Yeah, you're on it. And what we try and do with the center of gravity, and it gets, I mean, this could be a 5-hour conversation.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you there.
Today's modern golf equipment is extremely de-lofted. And so when people get the newer sets, you know what's interesting, Matt, is about a year ago, the study came out that the average golfer has a driver that's 2 years old. And they have a set of irons that averages 8.5 years old. So the average golfer isn't buying irons all that often. And you touched on it earlier about the newer golfers going into the retail store.
Yep.
And they go, holy cow, the new technology. Boy, I hit my 9 iron. I used to hit it, let's just say you hit it 135. But my 9 iron now, even though but 10 years later, it actually goes as far as my old 7 iron. Well, over the years, what's happened is the clubs have been so well engineered with the modern technology of CAD engineering and being able to optimize every gram in that head. We can optimize those CGs. So it's a couple of things. A, the CG is optimized and the design of the head is completely optimized. And it allows us to move the weight exactly where we need to. And plus the lofts are, you know, a lot stronger now than they've ever been. So, you know, and you can support that stronger loft by the optimized CG. So, you know, you may look at a 6 iron today, might have been your old 4 iron some years ago on loft. And you say, well, how come I can hit it so much higher and further. It's because of the engineering technology, like SolidWorks, things like that, that we can go in and we can just manipulate that CG to get exactly the optimized performance out of it.
That's awesome. Hey, another question from Dave here said, should you have your wood stepped in frequency, say 280 hybrid, 276 3-wood, 272 driver? I know that's going back a ways there, but yeah, I know what I understand the question, and I want to get your philosophy on that.
Okay, we'll repeat that one more time. You broke up a little bit.
Yeah, it was on a chat, so it was should you have your wood stepped in frequency? Example would be like 280 on the hybrid, 276 on the 3-wood, 272 on the driver.
Exactly, yes. Absolutely, I would. And because you're playing a shorter shaft, typically there's a little more loading on that shaft. And what we noticed is, and this is just from personal experiences, is that, outside of Ben Hogan, which did something completely unique that we found while we were up there working on the Hogan irons, we were going through some of his notes. Typically what you want is a little stiffer shaft. It's a little shorter club as you work your way through the set, so you want that higher frequency. So that club is, you want a little softer shaft to help allow the head to rotate, especially with a driver. What you want is the CG of that head hanging off the back of the club there. You want that CG to kind of rotate down. I know I'll have to put up some images or send some over to Matt so he can
yeah, I know what you're saying. That's good.
The back of that head to rotate down and under, whereas on an iron you're hitting down on the ball. You're trying to get on a descending angle of attack, where a driver's on an ascending angle of attack. But what you want is with those shorter clubs is you're swinging down on them. They're shorter. The head is heavier, so you need the frequency for the stiffer shaft. All of that plays into it. Plus, you don't need as much help because there's so much loss on the shorter iron clubs, like your 8-9 versus your 3 and your 4. So what we typically did was we go with a softer, or we step those frequencies. So they're a little bit softer in your longer clubs that allows the CG and the head to rotate properly through impact. But one of the cool things was, in working on the Hogan program, is we noticed that Ben Hogan said that he hit his 6 and 7 irons the most often in a round of golf. And so he said that no golfer, in his notes, said that no golfer should ever make a full swing at full speed with a wedge. And so what he did was he had the same frequencies for his pitching wedge that he did his 3 iron. And then his 9 matched his 4, his 8 matched his 7, and his 6 iron was the stiffest club in the back. And that was because he said that he hits more 6 and 7 irons into green than he does anything else, and he needs those to be the most stiffest shaft, and it felt like it gave him a distinct advantage in the set. So, but for the average golfer, yeah, they're steps from 270 with your driver, 273, 276, 270, and it's the same goes for your iron shaft. They just progress up the chart.
I want to jump in here for just a split second, because I know for a lot of my players on here, they're going to have the question like, why would the 6 iron be the stiffest? And my answer, you tell me if I'm wrong, but is with a great player, one of the greatest ball strikers, if not the greatest ball striker of all time in the history of the game. The better the ball striker, they're going to want those clubs like that stiff. That one, there's dispersion, right? Am I off on that, or?
No, that's 100% it, and I probably didn't explain that in a little better detail. And what he felt was that if he got that 6 in his 7 iron, and a couple of his sets, the 6 and 7 were the stiffest, and then he tapered them off depending on that makeup. And those were the stiffest, and those were the ones that he felt like he hit the most often, and that he had to have as precise as possible. He felt like if he was a little stiffer with those, he was okay. And then he would go softer in his 8-9 pitch, because he didn't make full speed swings with his wedges. He said that no golfer should ever do that. It should be, a 3/4 speed and working your way down. But he made his set to the point where the 6 and sometimes the 7 were the stiffest clubs in the back. But again, his impact location was probably the size of a dime, maybe even smaller. Whereas the average golfer, that's
Interesting.
You can look at the wear pattern on a golfer's face and tell you know, a pretty good indication of their impact location.
Yep. So let me go to the next one here. Grant. How do you fit lie on a full set of how do you fit the lie on the full set of irons? I think he means like how you fit in the lie angle each club. I know Jim Furyk has I call it progressive lie angle fitting. I'm sure you probably do the same thing. We used to do the same thing, so we would fit off of a 6-iron or whatever it would be, and I would just tell them, I was like, we're going to progressively go down. So we would match clubs going down, and we would match the lie angle going up if necessary. Can you explain, like, so why it would be flatter going towards your wedges from a 6-iron and more up going to the 3-iron?
It has to do
Typically.
with the swing arc and the swing plane that we see most golfers coming into. Whereas a shorter club mat, most golfers are standing a little closer to it. They get the club kind of steep and they come in kind of steep. And so what happens is with a longer club, it's more of a round the body type of position. So what we notice is that if we just take and we set the set, and if you go to Golf Smith, I don't want to pick on those guys or anybody else, but if you just go and you fit a 6-iron, that's a great place to start. Okay? But at some point, you have to know what every club in your bag is doing. Because we just don't swing the same. I know I don't, and maybe you guys, maybe the tour guys do. They swing the club pretty consistently on the same plane, same path, things like that. But the average golfer doesn't. And that angle in which they attack the ball, sometimes over the plane, sometimes under plane, typically under plane, what we saw with the longer irons, and over with the shorter irons, because they try and generate a lot of power and speed, and get down on a real deep angle of attack with the short irons, is what we noticed is that the lie angle has to be adjusted through the set. If you look at my set of clubs, not only do I have, and there's a lot of stuff that's probably over the top, but I have what they call a graduated progression on the lie angle. Each one of them is not, they're not all 2-degree flat. And I just found that works best for me. Somebody who has a more repeatable golf swing, you may find that you may go through the whole live course session and say, guess what? All of these are 1 degree flat or 1 degree upright, and that is a good indication of a really consistent golfer.
Yeah, I think that answers it. I drew a little line here showing like what you would typically see. So this is probably a 6-iron with Davis Love.
Yeah.
Now he's not going to have his lie angle up here like that high with his 3-iron. He's going to stay probably pretty close to where he's at. It wouldn't be that much. But with an amateur, you know this as well as I do. Their hands with a wedge may be down here where he's at on a sand wedge. Because they don't lose posture, they don't lose the pelvis coming forward, all these biomechanical things that are affecting the engineering of the club. But when they get to a 3-iron, they come out of posture so much that the handle rises so high, and that's why they get those toe strikes and off the that big high flip.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy, and the image you have on the screen is perfect.
The progression would be, I mean, ideally, and this isn't perfect, I mean, because it is so individual, but like whatever Davis Love is here, I know Jim Furyk, there's several of them, Davis same way. They might go like he might be 1 flat here, he might be at 1 up at the 3-iron, and he might be at like 1 flat potentially with a sandwich, because last thing they want to do, and you know this more than I do, David, is the last thing you want to do is get the heel, stuck in the ground with a sandwich. That's why they grind heels off. So.
Yeah, exactly. And what I see, Matt, is take Davis's picture there, and what I see is a lot of golfers struggle to hit the 3 and 4 iron because the set really isn't fit for them. They need a hybrid or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what they do is, what I typically see is, if you look at a Davis's shaft there, with the longer irons, they're trying to come in low and trying to manipulate the head and they're trying to get lost back in the club because they're hitting these low rockets.
Yep.
And what they're trying to do is get under it and flip it. And then it creates nightmares. And if you get the set fit properly, you don't have to do that. And so what you want is, you want a set that fits to you so that you can handle, say, a 5-iron per pitch or 6-iron per pitch, right? Whatever
Absolutely.
it is. but make sure you get those lie angles to match up to your swing.
All right, there's another question from Bob. If you have a favorite club iron, is it more of a function of your swing that fits the club, or that club was built or more balanced, better than the rest? Probably goes to the Bryson thing.
Okay, that's a really good question. There's a lot of answers on that one. One of the things I'll tell you right now is, if you've got a set of clubs that you bought, and we've all been guilty of it. We bought a set of 3 through pitch clubs. And we go through a set of clubs, and we just go, man, every time I hit this 7 iron is money. I know that I can hit this thing a ton, I can hit it at full speed. But then you go, well, guess what? My 7 iron goes as far as my 6 iron. Well, that's a function of like 10 different things. but I'll tell you, one of the biggest contributors to that is the shaft's not being in the optimized position, even though they're steel. Those shafts will perform better and more consistently with the shaft curing on your iron. So the first thing I do is I look at, okay, are these shafts cured? And you'll notice a feel difference. You'll notice a performance on your dispersion. The other thing to look at is when you're going through your fitting is, at that point, that's where you can get into your set makeup and your club gap. And what you're looking for in your clubs is you're looking for 10 to 12 yard gaps in your club. And what you may find, and this is not to knock any brand, but let's just say a Mizuno or a Callaway. You go buy them directly off the shelf. They might have a club that says, okay, my 7 iron, let's just say it's 40 degrees, and the pitching wedge, the 6 iron is 36. Well, they have plus or minus 2 degree tolerances on it. Well, if I take that 40 and my tolerance goes against me 1 degree, or let's just say it goes against me by 2 degree, well, now I've got a 38. Well, my 6 iron has 36 degrees of loss, and they actually hit the tolerance where it went plus 2. So now I have 2 clubs that are exactly 38 degrees in my set. The only difference is the length on it. So now you're going to have some weird performance variable in your set. That's why you have to, when you get your set kit for you in the retail store, 1, I always make sure that the shaft gets cured. And number 2 is I want lost and lie checks, and I want them recorded. Because I want to know exactly what they're putting in my hand. Every golfer should know the specifications of that club. You should know loft, lie, length, and swing weight on all of them.
So we have another question. I need new wedges, and we've used I've used the Vokies for a while, and hasn't been able to hit the Hogan irons, not the wedges or whatever. So anyway, your thoughts on wedges?
I think I wish I hit them better. Wedges are so individualized. What I will tell you is, when you're picking your wedges, know your surroundings, know your golf course. For instance, bounce angle or the camber on the sole is a huge factor when getting fit for wedges. To me, it's what is going to allow you to either play well or poorly with those wedges. There's what they call low bounce wedges, there's standard bounce wedges, and there's high bounce wedges. High bounce wedges are for golfers who make traditionally a pretty steep angle of attack. And you can tell this by looking at your divot. If you're one of those guys that takes a big divot, and it's deep, and it looks like the sod is this huge chunk of, I hate to pick on the guy, but that piece of sod that Jordan threw out yesterday, that's a pretty good piece of sod. But, there's a picture of a low bounce. The B sole is actually on the Hogan and the Score products, and then there's a high bounce. And the reason we like that bounce, think of it kind of like an air spoiler. And what you're trying to do is, as that club comes down, most people have a pretty steep angle of attack even with their wedges. And what you want is you want that camber or that bounce to allow that club to get into interact with the turf. You want that leading edge is going to interact with the turf. And that camber, whether you have a ton of it or you have a bunch, a high or a low, is going to determine whether that club continues to dig down into the turf or it comes up. So when I say knowing your conditions, what I mean by this is, if you're a golfer kind of who plays up in the Northeast, maybe like where my family is originally from, Virginia, where we play on some pretty soft golf courses, I want a lot of bounce. your ball's going to come up short because you weren't as efficient trying to get through the ball. Because what happens is you hit just a hair behind it. And what happens is, as that leading edge digs deep into the dirt, you're actually hitting it higher on the face. The higher you hit it on the face of that wedge, the less efficient you are. An eighth of an inch off center in a vertical CG impact is equivalent to about 8 to 10 yards of loss. So understanding where your bounce angles are important. If you play here in Texas, where you have a lot of high, really compact soil, it gets really dry. Typically, we notice golfers perform better with less loss. Matt, you may see something a little different, but this is just, again, this is what we've seen and what I've seen over the years is that knowing your conditions. If you're a golfer who makes a steep angle of attack and you're playing out at, say, Falcon Head, maybe the fairways get a little hard out there in August, it's just Texas, right? That's what happens. You put a lot of bounce on it, what happens is that camber hits, say you hit just a little heavy, and what it does is it's going to spring that leading edge right into the equator of the ball, and it's going to shoot that guy like a bullet right over the green. Whereas on a low bounce, you don't have so much camber, and all of a sudden, you're going to get under that ball. And that's where you may end up with a mix. So the question of, am I a low bounce player or am I a high bounce player? I think everybody is a mix. If you're a guy that can say you're on a hard, fast fairway, but you have really soft PGA Tour white sand in the bunkers where that thing, if I take that low bounce and I hit that super soft sand, it's just going to go, it's going to keep digging, and you're going to hit that loud puff, and the ball is going to go like 6 inches. Where that camber is going to allow that club to glide across and stay consistent in its depth through the sand, as opposed to just continuing digging down. And that's going to allow you to utilize the entire face profile of that club, and it's going to allow you to hit better shots. So you may end up with a blend on your club. But I usually look at it as course dependent. You're playing hard, fast fairways and things like that. Yeah, I like the golfer to be in the mid to low bounce window. And then if you're playing up in the Northeast, Seattle, Virginia, New York State, yeah, I like to put more of the mid to upper bounce on the club.
Yeah, I think with wedges, I mean, with my opinion, of course it depends on lag, right? Because lag has to do with angle of descent.
Yeah.
And there's different types of lag, so I don't want to go into all that stuff. But like a player that's coming in, like a pro, they're gonna. I don't know. I think that the lower bounce, it used to be everything back in the day was always low bounce. Well, nobody even really knew why they were doing it. I don't even know if the engineers knew back then why they were building low bounce. But now with of course your company with doing the engineering with Hogan and of course I think what was it before Score Golf?
Yeah, before.
I mean, now you get these cambered soles, the leading edge, where you got this roll. You create this roll, then you got some insurance from that, not getting, like the traditional low bounce. So the leading edge can go in, but then you get relief on the back. So it's kind of like you get both across. And I think this is what this somewhat illustrates. But with Edel Golf here in Austin, I think that they have some interesting, the concepts are really good. Even on, I've got the Adele wedges, and I play at Lake Cliff, and we've got that clay fairway base, and you just can't hardly, it's like hitting off concrete. But like I've got so much bounce relative to when I used to play, and it cuts right through it because now how guys like you with those advanced grindings on the front end of the club, the front end being, like I'll try to draw here, right here in this leading edge part. This part is such a crucial area now, where because you're adding this back end relief over here, because you can get the front edge down and roll it into it. The back end relieves it out, and then all of a sudden, it's just amazing how the engineering on clubs now. And Titleist has a couple of them as well, but I think if players if there's extreme low bounce, there's probably, I don't know, there may be something wrong, because you're probably picking it, because unless you're playing off concrete. But I like to see kind of like that that mid bounce or even more relief with a rolled sole right here in the front, cut leading edge, kind of the Edel and all that. I don't know. I mean, I think that it goes to a player. If you have a wedge, you're out there playing golf and you love your wedges. You know, probably I wouldn't tell you to ever change them, but I will tell you this: if you haven't tried Edel Golf, and I probably shouldn't even say this on here, but they're not my favorite company for a lot of reasons. But I will say this: this will tell you what I think about their wedges. They're not my favorite company to do business with or anything like that, but I will tell you that I think they have advantage, and there's something that you should consider as a player looking at. And if you don't go there, I think you should look at the Hogan irons. You know, they used to be Score Golf. Those are things when you put a club in. Everybody's hit the Vokeys, the Clevelands. Everybody's been there, hit done that. They usually have a decent experience, but I can't tell you how many players that I've seen when I put a Score Golf or Score Wedge, which is now the Hogan company. When I used to put a Score Wedge in front of a Vokey or a Cleveland, it would just school it. And when I put an Edel wedge in front of those two, except maybe a Score, those two companies will wear these other ones out. Callaway, I don't care which grind you put on it either. They just outperform it. And you know, I'm certainly not being paid to say that. And I actually don't like to say it in some ways for Edel, but I will give them credit. Their engineering is fantastic, and their wedges are an advantage. And you want that as pitching around the greens. You need that. So, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know what? A lot of golfers get hung up in name brands, and I don't care what the brand on my golf clubs is. I care what my score is.
Right.
I don't care if it says Edel. I don't care if it says Score. I don't care if it's a big brand. They all make good wedges. If you look at Bob Vokey's wedges, Bob, I consider him a friend several times, and nice guy. You know, his wedges are great. They're probably one of the number one, number two wedges as far as sales in the world. But they haven't changed in 20 years. And the profile and the bounce just haven't changed over the years. They keep around with just a little bit of the score change, groove change. But the guys that like Score or now Hogan and over at Edel, they're investing a lot of time and research into optimizing your game. And they're making wedges for you more better.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing I've seen change as much as anything. It seems is the wedges. So it's I think Jim, one of my buddies, Jim's he asked. Let's see what he said here. What is the recommendation on wedge fitting? And so I think we covered a little bit, but it's probably talking about like gaps. So I know you've worked on the launch monitors, equally as much or more than I have. So I know we do the gap fitting with wedges and trying to really nail those in. And I don't know if you want to talk about that. If you do, I think that would be what he's kind of going down as far as what he's talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to roll. I'm going to follow. And one of the reasons I worked with the Hogan guys is because I believed a lot of what Terry and I believe very similarly on this. Is that you look at the current tour player's bag, and this is why it's important to gap your clubs properly. You look at the guy that has go out there the average tour player bags, when they're 150 yards, they're hitting 9 irons, right? And if you look at the average set makeup that the PGA Tour player has, it's 3-2 pitch plus a 9 iron, or 3-2 pitch plus 2 wedges, sometimes 3. But most of the time these guys are carrying 2 wedges. And then you go, okay, from 150 yards in, which is where you're going to make 90% of your strokes, you have 3 clubs. You have 4 clubs. And then when you look at your bag makeup, you go, okay, I've got 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, I've got a 3 iron, I've got 6 clubs to now go over 150 yards. Now part of that is demanded by the PGA Tour playing such long golf courses. But the average golfer needs to figure out, okay, 10 to 12 yard gaps in your longer clubs, and then with your shorter irons, your wedges, and from really 8 iron down, I like to see that dispersion pattern on your length of carry to be somewhere in the 8 yard window, up to 10 max. It goes from 10 to 12 with your longer irons down to 8 to 10, because I want your than you are outside of 200. So what I'd rather have is have a step makeup where you carry more wedges than you can less long iron, so that you can get the ball closer to the pin. You can get the ball up and down. And that's kind of the philosophy that Terry Taylor installed in me, and one that I felt very passionately about was a big gap in the average amateur's bag. Just the fact that we have these huge gaps of loft, and we have these huge gaps in distance, whereas you see a guy out there trying to, great, he can hit his 60-degree glove, he can hit it, he'll go out there and try and swing the full speed, and he hits it 80 yards. Well, he's got a 54-degree glove that he hits 125. Now, all of a sudden, I've got to try and make up, 30 to 40 yards of club the next time I get in my gap, and I'm at 100, let's say I'm at 90 yards, I got a 45-yard gap between my two clubs. Now I've got to try and manipulate something. Am I the guy that's going to take that 60, try and put it back in my swing, and jump on it? Or am I going to try and take now a club that's designed that I normally hit 125 yards, and am I now going to try and throttle this back, try and hit a consistent, take 30 yards or 20 yards off of it? As opposed to trying to take yardage off club, go ahead and get the wedges fit for you for your yardage properly, and then you don't have to worry that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it did. And there's things now with most of us in reality don't get to train with a launch monitor and a TrackMan or Foresight or Flight Scope and all these things and so forth. And so I call it stacking, where you stack your wedges, where you may start at 20 yards and you stack them every 10 yards, and you just really learn that. But if you do have a chance to do that, I think you could start that process when you're doing your fitting at say 50 yards to all the way up to 150, and you could do that. You can certainly recommend to fitters like what you're looking for. Some of my best clients will tell me what they're looking for before they get there, and not so much rely on me. And when you do that, it shows the pro that you know what you're talking about. You don't want to go too far with that because you don't want to try to overstep your boundaries. But what I will say is, you kind of know what you're trying to do when you go there, and hopefully this session, if anything, will let you know like what you're trying to look for before you get to the fitter. Because if you just leave it up to them, myself included, I'm gonna do my routine thing, and this is what works and so forth. But if you say, hey, I'm really looking at I'm stuck at 50 to 150, and I'm not really getting the ball close enough to the hole. This is weak. I really want to fill these gaps in. They can work with you if you tell them. It kind of goes back to golf lessons. One of the things that I think that's really important is that if you go even to the golf lessons, you say if you go to any golf instructor in the world, they're going to tell you, they're going to say, they're going to come up with a laundry list of things that they could do to make you better. I'm the same way. When I see somebody, I see this whole picture and I see all these things. But the way I teach, though, and my philosophy is based on what's the one thing? What's the one thing today that if I do the one thing, this player improves, and it maybe knocks out 4, 5, 6, and 7 that we have in the equation. And I think that's really important, because if you don't, you leave it up to the teacher, the fitter, you might have 20, 30 things you're working on. You get confused and lost, and it doesn't work out. I think going back to the teaching, if you tell the instructor, say, hey, I'm going to give you here. You ever take a lesson from somebody? You put this on them and say, you get one thing. You don't get 2. You don't get option 3. You don't get option. You can't tell me 4 things. You can't tell me 3. You can't tell me 2. You only get one thing today. What's that one thing going to be? And that is, I'm telling you, that all of a sudden makes the teacher better. That doesn't just make you better. It's going to make the teacher better. You make the teacher better, it's going to make you better. And I'm telling you, when a player comes to me, I don't look at the 50 options that we have, because sometimes I've seen the golf swing so many times now, I could write a book when I see the player stand up there and hit a shot about the problems that they may have. But when somebody says, you got one thing, that all of a sudden you narrow the focus, everybody starts to do better. The instructor focuses better, you focus better, and you move forward. Same thing in fitting. If you know where you're going, and hopefully this is what this session will help you with, that will help you kind of go, this is what I'm really looking for. I fit in some of these, we talked about a lot tonight, but I fit right in this mold. I want to go this direction, and what's the one thing that's going to help me get there? and I think it'll help you.
Yeah, and I saw just a little pop-up there from Jim Frank.
Yep.
And he's exactly right. Guys and ladies that are here tonight, when you go to your fit, if you just go directly to the range and start hitting shots, that's a pretty good indication you're not getting what you need. You need to get a relationship with this person that's going to fit you. You need to sit down and they should be doing a pretty extensive player interview. You should be recording things like how many fairways am I hitting, how many putts per round, how many times am I getting it up and down, how many greens in regulation am I hitting. With the thousands of golf apps that are out there today, you can pretty much record your rounds to the point where, you know what, be honest with yourself. You know, be honest with the information you give to your fitter. Because if you tell that, listen, I'm trying to go from 120 to 90, we got a pretty broad range that we can start from. And we're going to look at some pretty glaring things. We're going to look at, oh, guess what, this person averages 40-some putts a round. Well, if you just putt twice around at 36, right, say with 4 shots immediately, and I'd like to get them down to about 30 putts per round. So now it's safe with 10 shots. Now all of a sudden, let's go look at that driver. Let's get that driver fit because you're taking 6 drops per round with your driver. We got to get that fixed at the same time. And all of a sudden you say, okay, at 5 shots here, 5 shots there, all of a sudden you go from 120 to 90, it's pretty good. But when you're the lower handicap golfers, one of the things you got to be honest with is like, guys, I'm just not hitting enough greens in regulation. You can walk in there and say, I want a new driver and I want to hit it 30 yards further. That's great. I mean, you can walk in there and do that. But be honest with your game and be honest with your fitter. Like, I only hit, 6 greens in regulation per round. Well, that's going to be a glaring note to us that there's a disconnect on your iron. So you're hitting 7 to 10 fairways. Let's get you fit in on that on your iron, or let's figure out what's going on with your wedge. Let's figure out why you're not getting it up and down. And so, one of the things as a fitter is, it's, you want to make sure you're completely honest with it. Just like with Matt, if you guys are going in there to give a lesson with Matt, you want to tell him what's going on and let him work with you and say, hey guys, I just don't feel like I'm hitting it solid anymore, or whatever the case may be. When you go to your fitter, it's the same thing. Like, with all the apps today, you can immediately download your app directly to your screen and you get an Excel chart. And if you combine 10 to 20 rounds and you look at it and go, God, I really don't get a lot of greens. Or guess what, I really don't put the ball in play off the tee all that much. I'm taking 3 drops per round. One of those numbers is going to stand out pretty glaring to you, where you can go get fit pretty quick. So yeah, data is important. I believe it was James that asked that question, or
Yeah, Jim. David had a question. He's got a son that's on our junior program. Just wicked talent. I haven't posted his swing yet, but that's coming soon. Going to win a lot of tournaments. Probably play at the next level. But he, for his son, I think his son's 7. David, you can correct me if I'm wrong here. But when fitting junior golfers, should you custom fit a quality junior set for them, or is there any possible to fit them with any other with any full set? And like again, he's 7, so when you're talking about junior golf,
custom fit.
yeah,
and what you're looking for there, and one of the key things with juniors is weight. The weight of the golf club, the weight of the shaft. Don't just go in there and take your clubs that you have, Dad, and just saw them off and put a grip on them. That club is too heavy. You're going to develop some bad swing habits. Matt, you may jump in here at any time on this, but what we see happen is Dad likes to take his clubs, doesn't want to spend the money, and they saw them off, and all of a sudden they get some, not to pick on her, but Natalie Golbus used to have this huge dip in her golf swing, and it just looked like the clubs were so heavy it pulled her forward. We see that with a lot of juniors that come into fitting. Really, there's absolutely nothing wrong with high-quality graphite shafts for juniors. Yeah, it gets a little expensive over time, unfortunately. But when you're working with somebody like Matt and you're getting lessons, and this kid, has this super talent,
yeah.
One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to ingrain bad habits. And if I give a 7-year-old a club that's so heavy that they start dipping or they get some over-the-top move to try and generate club head speed, you're negating all of that talent, in my opinion. And Matt may be different opinion, and I'm okay with that. But
no, I definitely think it pulls the golfers around.
Get something that you can swing properly. I mean, you're not going to fit yourself for something that you can't swing properly. And junior clubs are so available now, and graphite shafts are available in every length possible. It makes it pretty easy to get them, and not a lot of cost involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see that in the adult world too. I mean, where you see players that are playing stuff that's way too stiff and heavy, and it just starts pulling them around instead of them, being able to take control of the equipment. So I think it can go even up to that level too. But his son, the clubs that I saw the other day, when we had a live session, and this guy, I'm telling you, he's one of the most beautiful golf swings I've ever seen, and that's saying something. You know that. His clubs were pretty close to the line, but I'm not even sure what the equipment was that he was playing, and I'm not sure how complete the set was. But I would say that as somebody at his level, David, I know you're on here, I would tell you that I would make sure he has a complete set, because he's good enough now where, it still is. I mean, there's still junior sets are like at that age, you got a 7-9 pitching wedge, putter, driver, and a hybrid or something, which is great. But I would probably start filling in those blanks, because he can space those clubs out. He can gap those clubs. He's good enough. He hits the ball solid enough that he can see the difference between that. I don't think he needs 3 irons or any of that stuff, but I think that you can gap him in. If he's got in between irons that he doesn't have in his bag, I would fit them exactly the same and put them in there, and then get the loft strike. At that level. And most of the time, I would not say that. If it's a junior that's just beginning and they're just trying to learn the game and they're just coming around, and it's a process, man. There's some kids like him that they're born with that talent, and they can space clubs right off the bat. I mean, there's no process to it. I mean, the process is just changing levels each time, not so much like having to learn the swing and all that stuff.
So you don't want to give them something that negates every bit of the talent that they have and all the lessons and hard work that they're putting in. And you see that all too often with juniors, is that they either have, I would say it's in the high percentages, well above 80% of the juniors that I've ever seen come in for a fitting, they're just in the wrong equipment. And you get them in the right equipment, it's amazing how much fun they start to have. And, no different than adults,
Yeah, and that's the part of the process. I mean, the process is different for everybody. There's going to be players that don't have to work very hard their whole life at it. I mean, they have to work, or they play. And then there's some that really work at it and they get it. There's different road. Everybody's going down this different road to get to the end result. But if you're an adult or a kid, I still goes back to the same philosophy I had earlier when we first started. You don't want to train an adult any different than you do a kid. We try to do that in the golf world, and it's crazy. You want to train an adult the same exact way. If you make it hard, so a good example of this is if an adult goes out there, and I've seen it happen more than once. They go out and buy a set of blades, and they buy the set that's too short, too stiff, all that. They go out there, and here's the philosophy, but that they have. They're competitive people, and they're successful people typically. They want to go out and prove that they can do this, and they think by going out and buying these clubs that are impossible to hit is going to make them better. And as you and I both know, we've lived it. We already know all this. Is that what happens is you ruin your confidence, and when you ruin your confidence, eventually you just kind of throw your hands up in the air and go, oh my God! Now you start changing your swing, you change your ideas about who you are. You can't play. What you want to do is buy the easiest thing you can possibly do, work your way from the green back, and do the things you would do as a junior. You wouldn't buy a junior the hardest set of the golf clubs in the world to hit. Like, you wouldn't give. Tiger Woods had clubs fitted from his dad. Everybody knows in his book that they were fit from the time he started swinging a golf club. They were fit for his size, and there's a reason for that. So for lack of compensation, and he didn't want the kid to struggle. The less struggles, the more confidence you're taking away from them. The more confidence you take away from an adult or a child, both the same. There's no difference. You take a confidence away from an adult or child, and their journey will not be very good.
I agree, man, and I still am puzzled by the fact that, and we could have a 10-hour conversation on this, is to why golfers magically get to a certain handicap or scoring level, and they suddenly think they need tour issue blade equipment. That blade is for about 1% of the population.
Yep.
And you know what? I agree with you 100%. You made the statement is that, well, why do people try to get golf equipment that's impossible to get? Yeah, the Hogan of line was a set of signature blades. That's what Hogan was named for. That's what it was built on. It was built on precision, high quality, forged blade clubs. And we had to honor that tradition. And we did that. We built a set of irons that probably is more as forgiving as some of the cavity backs out there. Well, with Terry's permission, I could probably post some of the data on it. But for the most part, most golfers need a good, easy set to hit. And why make the game difficult? You know, just because you're getting good doesn't mean that you need to have something impossible to hit. I agree with you. That statement you made was fantastic.
Hey, Robert, he has a question about, do you recommend any sites where I can, internet sites where you can find a reputable club fitter in my area? So basically, Robert's in the Northeast. It's not Boston. Robert, if you could just chat in, you know, the city you're in, because between David and I, Jeff Morgan is from the Northeast as well, so he's a good friend of both of ours, so we may have somebody we can find for you up in that area. I'll definitely help anybody on here, anybody in our program. I will help you find somebody in your area that, if all I got to do is go to their site, and I can even make a phone call to help them, because, or to tell them about, you know, find out about what they do, so we can help you. That's the whole goal of this thing, you know.
Matt, do they still? I think Golf Digest offers. I think you can Google it, like top 100 club fitters in my region, or go to the PGA website. One of the two of them had a listing of like the top fitters in certain zones or areas. I'll look that up and send that over to you.
That'd be good.
I know one of them has it. I just don't know the link to it.
Yep. And you know, like you said, when you get with somebody that's a different level, all you have to do is go to somebody that fits you and goes through the basics, and you'll see somebody that's different than when they go through and take the step by step and really, you know, they really care about, you know, the driving, the putting, the wedges, the irons, the hybrids, and really in that order. And you get done. You may not, you know, your budget may not allow it right now, but that's something down the road. If it does, it does. But if somebody said, what's the most important club in the bag? Well, that depends. Like, I think David put a good statement on that earlier. It's like, well, it kind of depends, but like, you have to ask a question. And most great, really good high-level club fitters will have a questionnaire. I don't know if you did that, David, but I know we used to do that. We would talk to them as we were, before we fit them. I want to know about their game. I want to, like you said, about the stats. I want to know about what they're doing. If somebody tells me they're driving the ball great, I'm not really wanting to go fit their driver. If they're hitting, you know, if they're hitting their driver out of bounds, two out of every 4 holes here, then all I care about is their driver. I think that, in my opinion, the driver's most important, putter's is second, and wedges are third. But that's only relative to somebody that drives the ball poorly. You know, if you drive it great, then it's probably going. I'm going to look at putter second. If you putt it great, then we're going to talk about wedges. If you wedge it great, I'm going to talk about irons. I might even go hybrids before irons. I mean, hybrids are. I'll tell you. I want to backtrack on a few things here. I know we've been on a long time, but some really great things that David had spoke of that I checked off so I could come back to, and one of them was you know, hybrid philosophy basically. So I used to do this all the time. So I would fit I had an indoor facility and outdoor, and there's a question on here about which one's better. Well, it depends on, you need both, in my opinion. Some really need both. You need turf interaction and all that. But hybrid philosophy is like, so I would do this with all my players. My juniors hated. Juniors do not want to hit hybrid, especially very elite level juniors. They were like that. They think of that as kind of like old man clubs or whatever. It's all ego. So what I'd have to do is I would go put them out in the fairway, and I'd say, all right, hit your 3 iron, hit your 3 hybrid. And I'd put them right in the middle of the fairway. And a good player, really good player, is probably not going to be a whole lot of difference. And then what I would do is I would go put them in a little divot, in a small little divot. And I would say, hit your 3 iron, hit your hybrid. And David knows this, what's going to happen. The hybrid's going to win every time. I'd go put them in light rough, and I'd put them in deep rough and hit the hybrid. And so, and then I would put them in these awkward lies around the trees, and then chipping. I would say, all right, I want you to chip with your 3-iron and chip with your hybrid. Because there's times where you get in these bad lies around the greens where you need a chip and run across the green, chip with your 3-iron, chip with your hybrid. And so this thing wins like 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 5 times. And the player just kind of defaults into going, okay, I don't want to play a hybrid, but like, yeah, I've got an advantage. And golf, it's only about advantages. Advantages are like working out is an advantage. Golf fitness is an advantage. Taking lessons are an advantage. Short game's an advantage. You go down the list. Mental training, like Jason Day, you see the best player in the world, number 1 player in the world, does meditation and visualization every single day he wakes up. All these things are about advantages. That's all it's about. Diet, it's the same thing. It's an advantage. And so what you try to do is you got to prove to these people like that it is an advantage, and then they start to listen. And so that's what I used to do. I couldn't do it in my shop. I had to do it on the golf course. I had to put them out there and say, look. And I had to do it with my tour player. Wes Short. Wes. You've worked with Wes with me. With our fittings back at Golfsmith, been the Golfsmith day. And the same thing with him. I showed him. I proved to him that the hybrids will, and we had to, flatten his lie angle 2 degrees with it, which is interesting. But we had to do a couple of things with it. But it proved to him that the hybrid was an advantage versus the old 2-iron, 3-iron type thing. And it's that way with anybody, really. I mean, it's very rare that unless it's a bad hybrid fit or something, So.
Yeah, the hybrid is the modern technology. I put it up there as one of the greatest inventions in the game. And what's funny, Matt? Again, I'll throw the Hogan reference out there. We were one day when we were up at Shady Oaks Country Club, we were looking through some of Mr. Hogan's equipment, and one of the things we found was, this has been 20, 30 years ago when he was at his prime. He was actually working on a hybrid at that time.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's just amazing what the technology is. But even a great, probably known as the best ball striker in the history of the game, was looking for an advantage, looking to make the game easy.
Yep.
And if we could just get everybody to just get rid of the notion that the standard set, a standard set of clubs is unknown. If you go to an OEM, they're going to tell you standard is 3 through pitch or 4 through gap, which is just a renumbered 3 through pitch. But what's standard for the OEM and standard commercial isn't standard for you. That's the whole point of going to the fitting. You may find out that you only need 4 irons, you need 2 hybrids, and you need a boatload of wedges because it's more important for you to score. So figure out and make the game easy as possible. And the fitter should be able to recognize that right off the bat. And if you're honest with your fitter and they know what they're doing, it'll prove very obvious pretty early in the fitting that if you're a guy that suddenly is being stuck into a blade, you might want to question it.
Yep. Yeah, if you go into a retail shop and somebody recommends blades, that means they're probably running really, really, really high on stock on blades, and they need to get rid of them. And that's not uncommon. And it sounds terrible, but I'm just telling you the truth. I've been in this. I've been doing this a long time.
Well, they're on commission, and what you need to find is out a fitter that's not on commission. Because if he's not on commission, he doesn't care about the brand that you're playing. He cares about the game that you're producing.
That's right.
And you're after your game. And so, one thing that I always like to do, Matt, is, all right, let's go out to your local golf course. There's some courses here where you got some courses here. All right, well, you put down that hybrid, and I'm gonna hit this hybrid. Or you're gonna have your 3-iron, and you put down that $4.25 nugget of a golf ball you got there, that Pro League 1, and let's see you hit that forced carry of 200 yards. And let's see how many nuggets you put in the water with one versus the other. And when you're, $20 to $30 in the hole with your 3-iron, you're going to realize how easy that hybrid is. You're going to put that hybrid in your bag.
Yep. No doubt about it. I mean, hybrid, that's I was talking about my top 3 things, as far as it's always driver, putter, wedges with me, and then it's with fitting, and then there's a debate where it may be hybrids then irons. I mean, really, that's how much I believe in hybrids. I mean, now I don't believe in just any hybrid. I mean, I believe in ones that are fit for the customer or client or whoever. I mean, there you get the right one, they'll do whatever you want. They'll do more things. You can do more things with a hybrid. They're more universal than your irons are. I guarantee you that.
I agree 100%.
The other thing was, 46 inches on the standard length. I wrote that down because I don't know if it was you or if it was Jeff Morgan that brought that up one time. I asked him. I said, why are these guys making these drivers so long? And he said, well, we had a conversation, we had a meeting about that. We had all the OEMs in there. That's the all brand name companies in there, and nobody had an answer for it. Nobody even had all the answer was the other guys are doing it, and if the other guys are doing it, we're going to do it too. So it's like that. I don't know if it was you or Jeff. It might have been Jeff, but I remember him saying, he goes, "That's really not a very good answer." It's like that. There wasn't any science behind it. Wasn't any engineering behind it. It's just because the other guys are doing it, we're going to do it too. And a good fitter is not going to I'm not going to. The mass majority, I'm going to tell you, 999 out of 1,000 are not. I'm not going to fit at 46 inches. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to. So
I've only fit two 46-inch drivers or longer. One of those was the day David Robinson walked into Golfton, and one was for my friend Alden, who's 6'8".
there you go.
So you're talking about a pretty
narrow
group, right?
Yep.
But Matt, when we, the fortunate part of being in the golf industry, especially with people working with people like Jeff Sheets, I had that great privilege. And, we would talk to all the OEMs when they came in to Golfsmith, and we would say, "How do you guys do with us making these drivers longer?" And they were all honest. They were like, "Well, you're right. The other guy's doing it." But again, what they were banking on is they're banking on that one magical shot. They're not banking on you hitting. They don't care if you hit 6 balls out of bounds.
Yep.
They care that if you hit one shot on 18, you're getting ready to go home, you've taken 6 drops with that driver, you're ready to chuck that thing in the next instant replay golf that you can find on the way home. And you stand up on 18, you swing out of your shoes, and everything works right. And you just happen to time that super long driver right, and you hit it a ton. And then you know what you're going to do with that driver? You're going to put it in your bag, and next week it's the best driver you ever had. They're banking on that one-shot excitement. The bottom line is, I think it was 2 years ago, I think the average driver length on tour was under 45 inches.
Yeah, 44, I think, and a half. It used to be 44 and a quarter, and I think it's like 44 and a half right now.
Yes, the last I recall seeing was 44 and a half, and that was on that golf data check.
Mm-hmm.
It was around 44 and a half. Now think about that. Those tour guys, probably the average height is taller than, they're probably pushing 6'1" average height.
That's
now,
right.
Out on tour. Whereas the average male is only 5'9", 5'10".
Yeah.
So those guys are playing shorter clubs, and they're handing the average golfer these super long clubs. Again, it's all predicated on one big shot.
Yeah, 44 and 3/4 is a really popular number on the tour. I know with drivers, it's just right under 45. Like that's a really popular. But you got guys out there at that 44 and a quarter, 44 and a half, and then nobody's playing. I mean, there might be a few. I mean, actually, probably is. I mean, I don't know. I don't keep up with it as much as I used to. But there's not. I can't imagine a lot of guys playing 46-inch drivers because they can't handle that droop and they can't handle that extra length, and that's why they go shorter.
I mean, just look at Justin Johnson. He ended up. He's one of the longest hitters on tour. You look at that driver, he's got something like 44 and a quarter. He's 6'1", 6'2".
Yep. And he put the
He's
face on it.
Short driver, but he can control it.
You hit it on the face. That's the thing. It's like we talked about this earlier, but it's like you want to get that the torque ratio from when that ball connects to the face to get to stay on that face. And the longer that equipment is, and too short probably is bad too. I mean, if you get too light, too stiff, but there's a certain number there where you'll find to get a good fitter that you get that connection to the ball, and you know it. It's just that's a lot of times, and I've said this a million times when I'm fitting, is like I'm not going to sell you the equipment. The equipment's going to find you, and it finds you. You're going to know that you're just going to know. I'm not trying to sell you. The numbers change, the field changes, you kind of light up. That's what a good fit is, and all my job is to do is to put the right equipment until we try to get them into those things, to put the right combinations, and then the equipment will find you. And when it does, you better jump on it. And if you don't, you're playing at a disadvantage. And that's the whole point of this deal.
Yeah.
You know?
And I always look at length as like driving a nail, man. If I've got to drive a nail and I've got to hold it between my thumb and my index finger, and I've got to drive this nail, and I've got to hit it perfect. I got to drive the nail. Am I going to go grab the sledgehammer that's got a 3-foot long shaftler, or am I going to go grab that little short yellow handled one that I know that I can use a claw hammer, and I can hit that thing with a lot of force, and I can get it dead center every time? And that's the way you have to approach your driving.
Yeah, basically like this.
I gotta have something that I can drive the ball forward with every single time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those were, I think we covered everything else as far as that goes. I know the skid factor was another one I wrote down, but that's on putting. But let's just get in the ball. That you want to keep that ball in the turf when you putt. I can tell you that you don't want that ball to hop, and you don't want to drive the ball into the turf either. And that's another thing. That's a different conversation. We'd be here all night talking about this stuff, but. Club fitting is a tremendous passion of mine. I haven't done it in a long time, to be truthful about it. I'm kind of out of the game. I'm not even sure what all the equipment really is out there, but I did it for a lot of years, and I love it. If I just don't have the time to really do it anymore. But the basics haven't passed us by. But equipment will always evolve and it'll always change, and that's one of the things when you go to a high-level facility, in my opinion, they better have a big toolbox or you shouldn't go, and they better be very equipped with what they're doing and know exactly where they're going with you, and you should, a good fitter should run you through a questionnaire when you step up to tell them what you're looking for and all that. You should be going through a process, and with that fitter and developing a relationship. That fitter needs to get to know you and know where you struggle at and what he can do or she can do to make you better with your game. And that's all it's all about. And there's swings out of the equation for the most part. Most people on here know how to hit the ball, and you're in the program, you're going to be hitting the ball just fine. You got to pick the weakest spots. It also can be like, we didn't get into it tonight. Like I said, there's thing with fitting, you could go on and on and on and on and on. But like, even just having your lofts adjusted. Sometimes you have spacing in your lofts that you don't realize, and you need to, you got gaps in your 7-iron or 6-iron aren't matching up, and there's a loft issue or blah 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 blah. Lie angle issue changes a couple of degrees, and you didn't know it. It's affecting your ball flight. There's stories out there that are just insane. Just fixing the equipment. That may change your confidence, and if it improves your confidence, I'm on board, because if your confidence improves, your game improves, and there's just no doubt about it.
And I think, Matt, I love fitting golf equipment. I've been fortunate, fit golf equipment for some of the tour players. I've been for amateurs, some high handicappers, and even some veterans. I have that privilege of fitting for the Medal of Honor Society a couple of years ago. But one thing I'll tell, I know it's late, and your students have been just super for hanging in there on a really lengthy conversation here. But a fitting is not a lesson. And there's a dramatic difference between the two. When you go to a club fitter, you're in there to get fit for the golf equipment for your swing at that time. And it's not a lesson. If you get into a fitting where somebody's trying to adjust your posture and trying to move a lot of things around, that's a big red flag for me.
Yep,
You're
me
in
too.
there to get fit for the golf equipment for your swing. Not that fitters can't teach, but in my opinion, you're either getting a lesson on your swing or you're getting fit for golf equipment. And they're two distinct, different things that marry in a weird, incestuous way, but guys, make sure that, and ladies, that if you're getting a fitting and you're not getting some guy who's out there tweaking your posture or something crazy.
Yeah, I think that's probably it's as good as an advice that we've had on here the whole time, because when I'd have players, and I was caught in the middle. This. I mean, I was that kind of that teacher and the fitter. And when players would come in, they would always want to know, like, well, what can I do with this? And it was like, I would have to, and I was taught this from my mentors, and I was very lucky to have very good mentors with this, is they said, you just exactly what you said, you're going to have players that are going to walk in, they're going to tell you, what am I doing with my swing? What am I doing? and you just can't answer those. You just have to say, look, this is about the fit. And if you're not ready to be fit, then you need, maybe you need to go work on your swing, or you maybe need to get a little better. But if you're ready for this, let's go. And I think that was, I think that's the icing on the cake for tonight. I think that's a good place to end it tonight. With what you said, because that's exactly what I believe in my philosophy and so forth. But just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and staying as long as you did. And I want to thank David Cersley for staying and really going through the process and telling us about David. He's not going to want to hear this, but he is a genius. The guy is I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and that's why he's on here. I won't put anybody on here that I don't have a tremendous amount of respect for. They won't be on our deal. So, David, thank you a ton. I really appreciate it, man. And
any time. I mean, I know that we scratched the surface on about a 3,000-pound giant. So anytime we want to get some more special stuff, you can get in contact with Matt, and we'll set up some sessions. We can break them down to shaft fitting, or driver head, or iron head, or wedge head, and get real specific to what you guys want.
Yeah, I think it may go further. I think we kind of threw the ball out there. I don't know, it was a while back on just kind of shaft peering. We don't want to go there right now, but and I think that's where this whole thing started, and that's why I contacted you, David, to get it rolling. And this will help our clients and customers, and that is all I care about. So I hope everybody has a great night. And if you have any more questions, just send them to me, and I'll be glad to answer them.
All right, Matt. Thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Dave.
Bye.